Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining our session in which I will show you the tool which allows you to transform SharePoint Online into sophisticated workflow platform. My name is Paweł Misiurewicz and I'm CEO of Datapolis.com. In Datapolis, we develop business software solutions for almost 25 years. We were developing solutions in .NET technology from its beginning in 2001, and we are specializing now in SharePoint solutions since its first version. 6 years ago, in 2009, we released first version of our Graphical workflow designer, and during next years, we transformed it into powerful process platform. Okay, having 1 hour presentation, you would probably want to know in advance the agenda. So I will start with few words about Office 365, its workflow engine and its limitations. And just after, I will jump into live presentation of our tool, easy yet powerful, and I will show you first ready workflow and explain how it works from end user point of view and what you can do with it. And next, I will create this workflow for you to show how fast and easy it is, and I hope to do it in less than 15 minutes. Finally, after a short summary of features, I'll be waiting for your questions. And at the end, I will invite you for a small contest in which you will be able to win some nice prizes. So let's start. Office 365 and SharePoint Online are fantastic platforms for collaboration and group work. Thousands of companies and millions of users now are storing hundreds of millions of documents in Office 365. SharePoint App Store gives an easy access to hundreds of third-party SharePoint enhancements. Having all those documents stored in the cloud, natural move is to implement processes. SharePoint Online gives possibility of creating workflows which would control document flows inside Office, but there are no good native tools for creating them. Let's look at the workflow engines. In SharePoint on-premise, there are two different workflow engines. Windows Workflow Foundation 3, which is a version presented in SharePoint since version 2007, and starting from SharePoint 2013, there is also Windows Workflow Foundation 4, Workflow Manager. SharePoint Online gives only possibility to use Workflow Manager, so the version 4.0, for workflow implementation. What's the difference? The main difference is that version 4.0 is an engine separated from SharePoint. Thanks to that, it allows to keep entire SharePoint environment in more stable condition, and it's safer than the previous version 3.0. However, Workflow Manager has also its own disadvantages, and thus most of the third-party workflow tools for on-premise version of SharePoint are still built upon version 3. There are also a lot of limitations set by Office 365 itself. For example, workflows must be 100% declarative and use only Office 365 built-in activities, with no code behind allowed. Now let's see how it works. So let's begin our live presentation of Datapolis Workflow 365. Before I will show you how to create new workflow, let me show how to participate in existing one. This will give you a view from the workflow user perspective. As a CEO, I have to deal with many requests from my team. So I created on our team site a special list to handle all those requests. Today, I have one request which I already approved. That was the request from Andy for a new laptop, and the process is finished, terminated. I have 3 more, from Kathy for a new chair, from Cindy, she wants to leave before 4 p.m., and from Tom, who wants to work home office on Thursday. I will leave Kathy request for a moment, and I will approve Cindy request and reject Tom's request. So to do this, I click on the menu button, and here I see, except for the normal and usual items in the menu, I see my workflow, request approval, and all the available for me actions. And in this workflow, I have two possibilities: to accept or reject it, and to see the history. So in this case, I wanted to accept Cindy request. So I click accept, and I have just to confirm it. And in a few moments, I will see that the workflow has terminated. Now for Tom, because I need him on Thursday because there are customers coming, I will reject. Here I have to confirm as well, and I have to give the reason, because this is the way I did the workflow, to give always the reason for rejection. So I write that on Thursday we have customers coming to the office. I confirm, and now we see that Cindy request is approved and the workflow has terminated. And in a moment we will see also the same for Tom. Okay, now we see that Tom's request is rejected and that the reason that I gave on the form is written on the list. If I refresh once again, I will see that the workflow has terminated. So now let's recap what we have seen from end user point of view. We have seen full integration with SharePoint. All workflows were seen in built-in drop-down menu. User has, through this drop-down menu, access to all available to him actions, and he could perform any action available to him with a click in the menu. Workflow states are on the list, and there are forms available for every action. Now let's go back to our SharePoint site and let's see what we have under the hood. In the list menu, we have a new button, Datapolis Workflow 365. When we click on it, we can see all Datapolis workflow running on this list. As you see, there is request approval, the one that we are using, which we can delete, and we can see that it's deployed now, and we can define new workflows. Let's get inside. When we click for edit, the editor opens, and in a few seconds we see the workflow design. This part of designer we call business layer, because this is completely non-technical part on which you can see easily the business logic of the workflow, and it's a perfect place for cooperation between technical people who design workflows and business people who define the logic of the process. On this business layer, they can work easily together on the same workflows. On the left side, we see the menu with new states, with new actions that we can add, or workflow variables. On the left top, we see roles that different users may play in this workflow, and on the center we see the design. Start of the workflow in green and in the red, which is quite logical, and between them we have states and actions. As you can see, the moment you put any item on the list, it's moved automatically from the start to the next state, which is waiting for approval, and all the items were waiting for approval in the state. Because we have defined here two actions, accept and reject, this is what we have seen in the drop-down menu. If we define three more possible actions, we will see all five in the drop-down menu, assuming they are available to us in our role. Here we define different roles for different people, for different users, and we can quickly see who is assigned to what role. Director can do everything in the workflow. All users can only put their request and it will be sent for acceptance. But this is just the beginning. Now we can get inside the action, let's say reject, with a double click. And here we can assign a form which will be launched during this action. We can assign different activities and see permissions. In permissions, we see what we saw already from the toolbar, that the director is permitted to do this action, to reject, but not anybody else. With the launch form, we can launch forms. Forms are a very important part of the workflow designer because during execution of an action, you may need, for example, additional input. And this is the case in the reject action. We ask for the reason why the request was rejected. You can add different variables, and all those variables will be shown on the form as fields to be filled in. The last but the most important things are different activities that you can do during the action. When we click on the activities button, the new window will open with different set of activities. Now we are in a different layer of our designer, the part that we call technical layer. Here you can in detail define what's happening inside every action. In this case, we are inside the reject action, and we can define the different activities with drag and drop from the list. Because this is a very simple workflow, I have defined only two activities. One is the reason. This is the place in which the reason of rejection is put on the list, an explanation. And the second result, here we put the result, which is rejection of the approval, also on the list. So the user, the team member who has requested something, knows that his demand was rejected and why. So let's recap what we have seen this time. We went inside the workflow designer, and first of all, we saw the business layer, a place when it's easy to understand, to see the business logic of the process, a place for business users and technical people when they can work together on the same process. We can have states and actions and define them. We have possibility of very easy modifications of the workflow that could be done not only by technical people but also by just power users. We can define and assign different roles in the workflows, and we have available forms, variables, and activities. Next, we moved inside into technical layer. And here we have much more possibilities to create different activities inside an action, and many of those activities are predefined and we can program them with just drag and drop from the available list. Okay, so now we will design a workflow similar to the one that we saw in less than 15 minutes. We will first create a list, then we'll design in the workflow designer states and actions, and we'll assign roles, and that will be all. Next step, we'll define activity and we'll create a form which will take the data and put it on list. And finally, if still we have time, we will see how easy it is to modify something in the workflow. Okay, let's start. First, we go to our team site. We'll click to add a new list, custom list, and let's imagine it will be expenses approval. So we call the list expenses approval, and we create list. we go to the list, we'll add some fields. So we have already title, let's add a short description and maybe value of the approval. So we'll choose currency and its amount on the invoice. Okay, and this should be enough for the beginning. So now we have the list and we need the workflow associated with this list. So once again, we click list, we have Datapolis Workflow 365 button, and there is no workflow yet, so we create a new workflow. The workflow will be, of course, expense approval. It's quite important if you want to run more workflows on this list to name them correctly, because then on the drop-down menu you will see all the names and you have to recognize which workflow are you using. Okay, and the designer loads. First thing we have with the new workflow, the designer already has put the start and the end states for us. Of course, start is green and is red, and we have to add new states. So here we click on the state on the toolbar and we'll add the new state that we have to name. Once again, how we name it is very important, because then we will be looking at the workflow and we'll see in what state it is, and we have to understand what state it is. So if an expense will wait for approval, it should be in a state called, for example, waiting for approval. Now the workflow should move from start to the waiting for approval to the end. So we have to add an action. First action will automatically move the new item from start to approval phase, and then with approval we want to have at least two possibilities. One which will be reject, and the second would be approve. Okay, maybe you would like also to name the first action send for approval. Now, if you want it to make a little bit nicer and easier to read, we may edit the graphical side. And one more thing, we have to assign roles. At this moment, all users, as you can see, all users has access to everything. But that means that everybody can approve all expenses, which is not right. So let's add new role, manager. Let's choose an icon, and we have to add some people to this role. So we click on edit and we start typing names, and we see all people which start with PAWE in the company. It's myself and my business partner, and let's say we can approve all these expenses for one of us, so I will put both of us to this role. Okay, and now we see that manager has to be assigned to the role. So the easiest way is just to drag and drop to the role, to the state waiting for approval, and to the role of reject, and approve. Now we can verify. Manager has the right to do anything because he can also send for approval, and all the other users can only send for approval the documents, the expenses. As you can see, we could, for example, define one role that could only reject and another one that would only approve. It's all up to us. And now the workflow, the very simple, very basic workflow is ready. And we are ready to deploy. Let's click on deploy. We have successfully deployed the workflow, so we can go back to our list. Okay, now we will add an item and see what happens. So Andy, as you remember, wanted a new laptop. So let's say he bought it already. It was an approved laptop replacement. And let's say he had a budget $1,000 approved. So let's say he spent $920. And we wait a little bit because the workflow is starting already. It's changing state. So the workflow is moving from the start to the approval phase. Let's refresh it. And now you see the workflow is in progress and it's the waiting for approval state. This is why it was so important to call the state correctly. So now I'm coming to my office. I see new expense. Click on the menu. I see in the menu new workflow. I can reject or approve. So let's say I approved because it was approved before. Click on approve. Have to confirm. Let's refresh. And you see it's finished. Workflow is finished. State is finished. We did create a list, a workflow running on this list. We ran it and it was all less than 2 minutes. But there are still some things that are missing. For example, we would like to see how it was finished, whether it was approved or rejected, and if it was rejected, why. In order to do it, we'll first add new fields. So we'll edit the list and add new fields. First will be result, and it will be rejected or accepted. And the second, in the case of rejection, will be the reason. And now we have the result and the reason fields ready. We can go to the workflow designer once again. Edit workflow. And in the case of approval, we'll add an activity that will put the result approved on the list. We click on activities. So now we are in our technical layer in the activity designer, and we will take one activity from the ready activities. We'll just do drag and drop. It's edit list item. We'll call it result because on the list in the field result we want to see whether it was approved or rejected. And on the list we will choose the field result. Okay, the field that we have just created. And we want to put there that the expense was approved. Okay, okay. And we go back to the designer. Okay. And now reject. Reject is slightly more complicated because not only we want to put activity saying that it was rejected, but also we have to inform why. So for it, first we have to create a variable. Here is the variable that you can define, and variables in the workflow, they work more or less the same way as in normal programming. So this new variable we'll call reason, and of the type string. We have different types to choose. Okay, and now we have variable, and we will modify the default form. So in this case, reject, we'll launch form. The form rejection, we have already our variable reason, so we choose this variable, and because we put it as the field, automatically it will create a form with the field, one field reason. And it's very, very easy from creator. You just put variables that you want to be put on the form, and they will be put as the form fields to be filled in. So now when we click on the reject, the form will open and it will ask you to give the reason. Okay. And now with the form and with the variable, we can open activities window and put one activity to say that the result was rejected, and from the form it will put the reason into the field reason. And here for the reject action, we will create two activities. Once again we take edit item. The first one will be exactly the same as in the approve case, so in the result, we call it the result, and in the field result, here we'll put the value rejected. Okay. The second will once again edit one of the item of the list. This time it will be the reason of rejection. We call it reason, and also in the field, which is reason, we put the value this time taken from the form through the variable reason. So we look for the workflow variables. We have one that we have just defined, and this value will put in the list field. Okay, okay. And the last okay. Now everything is ready. We deploy workflow, and it's deployed successfully. We can go back to our list and see whether everything works. So on our list we'll put a new item and we'll try it. As you can remember, Cindy wanted a new chair, so chair for Cindy, and for $135. And we see it on the list waiting for approval. As you remember, I didn't agree for a new chair for Cindy, so this time of course I will reject it, and clicking here I see expense approval, our workflow with the reject. Let's click on reject, and you can see I have the form that we have just created 3 minutes ago with the field result to fill in. So I fill because I didn't agree for a new chair. confirm it. And that's all. We see that the workflow put the result rejected and the reason I put it in the form. So we have workflow ready with some forms, variables, and activities, all done in more or less 15 minutes. Just before finishing, let's see very quickly possibilities for advanced user, for power user, I would say. So when we go to the workflow, we'll just modify it. So let's imagine a situation when the IT department or the external supplier has provided us with the editor and already with workflows, and we are just power user and want to do small modifications. So let's imagine we have two steps for approval. So there will be waiting here for first approval, and there will be another approval, second approval. So when the first approver approves the expense, the second one may also approve, and we'll call it second approval, or of course reject. And here will be reject by second person. Okay, so now we have expense that's waiting for the first approval. The first person may already reject or send to the second one, and the second one can reject or approve. Now it was what? 1 minute, 2 minutes. We deploy it. Return to our list. And try it once again. Let's say somebody bought marketing materials. For a small $900. So now we see that it's waiting for first approval. We can click on it. We have reject approve. We don't want to reject because we won't see the second phase. So we click on approve. We confirm. And we see that now it's waiting for the second approval. And so the second approver may do second approval or reject by the second person. Let's click on the second approval, confirm once again. And now we see that it's finished and approved by two persons. So this was just to show you that with this designer, the modifications of existing workflow are very, very easy and very, very fast. So now let's review key features of Datapolis Workflow 365 Designer. It's fully graphical, drag and drop, fast and very easy to use. You don't have to do any programming. It's web-based, so you use it in the web browser. It consists of two layers, business and technical. Thanks to that, business and IT users may work using the same tool, and it helps with communication between them. Business layer shows you business logic of the workflow. It's designed to represent human way of thinking. Usually taking about processes, we think where it is, in what state it is now, and second, what are possible actions now. And that's exactly how our workflow is designed, states and actions. Most third-party tools for the workflows are using sequential workflows. Although in some cases they are better or a bit easier, in most cases it's a mess, difficult to read and almost impossible to change by somebody else. Now, technical layer. Technical layer lets you program, still using drag and drop, what's happening inside an action. You can use many activities that we have already prepared for you. So you are not limited to very easy workflows. You can prepare very advanced ones as well. And you have many more features in our Datapolis Workflow 365, like history, for example, where you can see what was happening in the workflow, who was accepting, who was rejecting, and how much time it took him, etc. And now let's see some examples from our customers. First invoice approval process. You see that what we received drawn on the paper, it's exactly represented in Workflow Designer. Second, headless request process. This time much more complicated process, still quite easy to understand in this designer. Try to imagine how it would look with the sequential workflows. And then recruitment process, exactly how we received it from the customer and designed in our Datapolis Workflow Designer. Thank you very much for your attendance. That's all. Now it's time for questions. We invite you also to our webpage prepared especially for you. There is more information there, a small contest with prizes, and possibility to build your own workflow with our tool. Thank you.